Welcome back to Trinidad and Tobago. I'm Hema Ramkey-Soon, and joining us on set this morning, Denise Deming. Now, I'm going to put this disclaimer out there. Ms. Deming actually taught me when I was at UE, and she was one of our excellent lecturers, one of those who will always leave an impact on you no matter what. When she was appointed to the board of the TDC, I'm pretty sure, like myself, a number of many of her past students, I look forward to seeing the change come to the tourism sector and to the tourism development company and all of the state enterprises. You look at some of the appointments and you get hope. Well, fast forward to 2016, May 2016, we've seen major shakeups. It came came as a shock to many. The story was confirmed by the Minister of Tourism, and that's Shampa Kajo, actually confirming yesterday that there is now a new chair of the Tourism Development Company. The story was also carried in one of the weekly papers. Ms. Deming joins us on set this morning. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm very well, thank you. It's been a beautiful morning. Did you see the sunrise?
I didn't, but I can tell that it is going to be always a beautiful day. How have you been?
I'm fine. I've been very, very well. And that's because, you know, growing up in East Dry River, Quarry Street, Laventille, you learn some resilience.
You know, when you were first appointed, I think, like many people, there was a sense of excitement. People thought that you would make meaningful change. When you received the call about the appointment, who called you and what was said to you?
The minister called me and asked me if I would accept the post of chair of TDC. And I had worked very, very closely with the minister in the lead up to the election. So it was something that I was very happy to do.
Why were you fired, Ms. Deming?
I think you need to ask that question to Corporation Soul, who's the person who authored the letter of termination.
What did your letter say?
It said three things. The first paragraph talked about reconstituting the board. The second paragraph talked about my termination. And the third paragraph talked about wishing me very, very well in the future. And I reflected on that letter. And that's really how I teach business communication. That's how you write a letter. You know, you open with a buffer, you give the bad news, and you have a very, very cordial closing.
Did you have any idea that this was going to happen?
This has been happening. This has been happening for a while. And it has been happening because the issue here is an issue of governance. And there has been tension around governance issues.
How do you define governance? Because I heard the interview you did with the news team, and you identified that as one of the main contributing factors, the governance policies. What is your definition of governance, corporate governance?
Well, when I was appointed, there are three documents I was given. The State Sector Monitoring Manual, the Articles of Association, and the third document was the bylaws of the company. But I was also referenced to the Companies Act. So when we talk about governance, those are the documents that frame everything that happens. And those are the documents that I kept very close to guide me in terms of what should be done. Mm-hmm. And very early, I recognized that there was a gap between expectations and what is written in policy.
Whose expectations? Your expectations, or the expectations of Corporation Soul, or the expectations of the political directorate?
All three. But the area where there was tension was the expectations of the board. And that again has to do with not understanding that the board really is policy and strategy, and the executive of the company is where the operations lie. And that is where there was a lot of tension, that there was just this misunderstanding of what should a member of the board do. Should a member of the board, and this I'm being very general here, should a member of the board be into the operations of the company and making decisions?
Now, there's always a balance with every board, performance and conformance. So you
Mm-hmm.
determine what type of board that you sit on. Mm-hmm. Is it that the board couldn't decide what type of board it was, or they couldn't take your leadership guidance on it?
You give it as an either or. You know, because leadership is not just, it doesn't only reside in the chair. The leadership resides in the entire board. And one of the things that I would like to see in the future, because that's where my interest is, how does Trinidad and Tobago continue to do what we're doing? Because we are responsible for a lot of resources. This is a subvention board, and we have two kinds of boards. We have the subvention boards, and then we have the other boards companies that are expected to make a profit. And Trinidad and Tobago has to start getting value for money.
When you talk about performance and conformance of the board, you talk about the governance structures, and the board couldn't decide whether it was policy and strategy or implementation. Conventional theory will say the board determines policy, the management team will implement policy and create strategies around that. So we've gotten that out of the way. What was it that they wanted to do that you didn't agree with?
That's specific. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about general issues around
But there must have been something that occurred, because if you tell me, well, I would say, as a management student, well, this is what the board does. They formulate policy, and you will have the management team implementing this policy. If they wanted to micromanage, micromanaging will be selecting contracts, will be implementing or dictating who, what, and why. Is it that you disagreed with something?
It's not a question of disagreement. It was a question of how do we operate. You know, and for example...
Well, there must have been something that you raised a red flag about.
No, I think I raised a lot of red flags. I'll give you an example of a red flag that I raised. And that is the issue of when you come into the organization, the first board meeting, we got a document that was about 3 inches thick, between 2 to 3 inches thick. And my first reaction to that was, in this day of modernization and technology, you can't be giving me this document. We have to find another way to do this. And that created tension. Because there were board members who said, no, I want my document, I want my piece of paper. And my position was that in an age of technology, where you are involved in the TDC, Tourism Development Corporation, where tourism now is driven by technology, that's how people decide where they're going. It's all technology, it's all on the internet, it's all computer driven, it's all a handheld device. And you're still talking about paper?
Is it that the board members were ill-equipped to deal with the challenges of the industry, or to deal with the needs of the industry?
I think several people are ill-equipped. And I think that Trinidad needs to work through how we select people.
You talk about one board meeting, but obviously one board meeting and saying that I don't want people, because I can say that I prefer to read on my phone, and yet my management team will call every day and say, you look like you're on your phone. I'm like, well, my phone is my email and my notes and my Word and everything else, and I prefer a handheld device. Yeah. But that cannot be the reason that that fallout was the disparity between you and the board members.
I'm giving you an example of conformance and performance. That's what I'm doing, giving you that example. And what I'm really going to do as we have this conversation is to protect all of us, because I'm not interested.
They didn't want to protect you. You're the one that's out.
Okay. That's okay. That's okay for me to be out, simply because I have a greater vision. And, you know, I have expressed my vision. And I don't know if that was an issue, that the chair is not supposed to have a vision. And that has to be foolish.
That has to be very foolish.
If you think the chair is not supposed to have a vision, then that is foolish. And when we look at how this story broke, there are some clear issues, again, of governance. Because the way this story broke, it broke in one of the weeklies.
In the Sunshine newspaper.
And when I look at the detail, if I was in government, I would be scared. Because it means that a media outlet has a kind of access to detail that is frightening.
Now, the Sunshine alluded to contracts. They alluded to several issues in the operations of the board. Are any of the allegations made in the Sunshine true?
I am not about to comment on the Sunshine, because clearly the Sunshine has a link that is higher than me. For the Sunshine to have written that story, they are very, very closely linked in. I know that some of what we do is porous. I know that a lot of our borders, a lot of it is porous. However, for the Sunshine to have had that level of detail and the kind of content that they had, if I was in government, I would be worried about my security.
Now, the line minister says that there were challenges. They sought, and I think we probably will have the sort a little later, said that there were challenges. What are some of the challenges that you think she's referring to?
I don't have a clue.
That was her reason. It was a 3-second shot where she said that Ms. Deming is no longer there, the new appointment, and that there were challenges, that the board faced challenges. Were you aware of these challenges?
I'm not aware of the challenges, and I really have some difficulty understanding in a 6-month tenure what those challenges are. The other difficulty I have is that in business, we come from different places, And conflict resolution has to be a mechanism. If we fire everybody, what are we going to do?
Do you feel like a political scapegoat? Do you think that the minister just couldn't get involved, that they couldn't do? And I'm going to say, Botiwari got involved with this CDA board, and he said, well, it's either you all go or I go, but I can't work with you all.
I don't see myself as a political scapegoat. I see myself as an independent thinker. And I see our society as having not enough room for independent thinkers or for divergent views. What we want as a society is conformity. We want everyone to say, yes, sir, no, sir, how high, sir? You won't get that from Denise Deming. And the people who appointed me knew that.
Tourism is not a place to conform. So what do you think is going to happen to our tourism sector? Do we give lip service to the tourism sector? If you tell me that maybe... I'm trying to figure out whether or not you say ask the question to Corporation Seoul, but the line minister has a great degree of control. Is it that the board members say that they couldn't get along with you, that they didn't understand you as a chairman?
Your original question spoke to the future of tourism. And my response to that is there's a bright future for tourism, but we have to become very real with what we're dealing with. We have to decide which is the product. We have to decide what is the role for Tobago. We have to decide what is Tobago's product.
Is Champa ill-equipped to hold that portfolio?
That's a real hard question. Anybody who goes out there on the political hustings and people vote for them have to be ready to do it. I can't say that.
Yeah, but obviously she's the line minister. There must have been a level of acceptance, and you are the one that's out, and the rest of the board remains in.
You see, you regard me as out, and I don't regard me as out. You know, because we have to start operating in the national interest. Being off of a board is not an out. Being off of a board gives you an opportunity to express independent view. And that's where our society has to go to. It has to go to inclusion.
Are you the Helen Drayton or the Jolene John?
You know, ironically, Helen and I were in the same cohort when we did our MBA.
Ironically, both of you all taught me, actually. And the two chairmen that I thought would have done a great job would have been you and Helen.
Yeah. I don't know. I have a tremendous amount of respect for Helen, and I can empathize now with maybe the road that she walked. But you know, that is all looking at the past. My bottom line is, where do women in our country go?
But you see a trend here. It's you, Helen Drayton, and Jolene John. Is it that women can't find a place in leadership, or is it that independent, strong-thinking women can't? Because Helen Drayton's issue was she, again, the conformance and performance issues, she did not believe that the board could have been, because there was the absence of a CEO at that time. And there was obviously a balance that had to be struck. Her issue was that board members didn't understand their role as a board. You are now expressing the similar sentiment. And Jolene John was fired, a woman who survived 2 administrations, for her tone.
So then maybe there is a trend. I mean, I can't deny that there seems to be a trend. And the root cause analysis on that I haven't done, but my speculation is that our society is not ready for independent thinkers and for people who are not simply focused on the tribe. People who have a wider focus, people who understand that if you are put in a position of responsibility, you are responsible for Trinidad and Tobago, for every citizen, not for the tribe who supported the party to get you in. And to me, the issue there is an issue of politics versus governance.
And is it that the PNM is run by politics and not necessarily governance?
Every party in our country over the last 25 years, and I would hold out the NAR, but every single administration has been run by politicians in the interest of the politics and not necessarily in the interest of the governance.
And do you think that you are a victim of not being political?
I could never be a victim.
What do you see yourself as? I'm still trying. What do you think was the breaking after 6 months? And I mean, I have spoken to you in a professional capacity, even when I have problems with my brand, and I would send you messages and say, I don't really know what I'm doing here. And so after 6 months, I can't understand what was the breaking point that this board decided they couldn't.
When you think of a breaking point, you think of, you know, tension going on.
Yeah, I think of something that was the final straw.
That's not how I see it. On reflection, and you never regret what you do. But I have a friend who called me when the when the appointment was announced, and she said, Denise, I don't know who's leaving first, you or Helen. And I thought that was so mean. But when I reflect on it, my conclusion is that the composition of the board was unfortunate. And although the Corporation Soul has talked about reconstituting the board, that is where the issue really began. If
you tell me you're reconstituting a board, then I will think everybody should leave.
Well, in this case...
I would think that everybody should be gone, if that's the issue. That's what I understand.
In this case, as far as I'm aware, the reconstitution is they've reconstituted the chairman out. And this is not the first time this has happened. The former Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Patrick Manning, reconstituted the HDC board and kept the chairman and got rid of everybody else. So it's a very creative way of doing whatever governance needs to do. But Hema, I go back to...
Is it a competency issue, a skill set issue, or are you simply... The previous administration was chastised, and I could tell you there were people sitting... There were people sitting on major state corporations, 20-something years old, who had less qualifications than me. And I'm thinking, do you understand the role of a board? Have we returned to that model where as long as I hold a party card, I am put to run and make decisions about millions of dollars?
We haven't returned. We never left that. So it's not a return. We're put there as political prizes, as thank you notes. And if you're going to do that, then you have to take a different approach. You have to take an approach that says, before you even meet as a board, let's do some governance training so you understand roles and responsibilities.
Do you think the TDC board is competent in its current composition?
Is it well, under the chairmanship as declared, the TDC board should work. But I'm saying to you, Hema, it's a bigger issue than putting bottoms in seats. It is an issue of what is the overall policy, what's the overall strategy, where are we going, what should we be doing, where is the line between the board and the operations. There's an analogy I use.
Was there micromanagement?
Well, there's an analogy I used to one of the board meeting at one stage. I said, you know, if you look at some analysis of the rate of compensation between the board and the people who work at TDC, it's about 10 to 1. If that alone should tell you where your work is. Because if the management of TDC is being paid 10 times what you are being paid as a board member, doesn't that give you a picture about what was intended here?
Do you feel... We have to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the issues surrounding governance in our country and whether or not Denise Deming feels slighted, wronged, and will she be exploring her legal option today with us. Contracts, personalities.
We're going to...
Welcome back to Trinidad and Tobago. I'm Hema Ramkisoon, and we're continuing our conversation with Denise Deming. Ms. Deming, now the former chair of the TDC board. Now, I asked earlier about the Helen Drayton and Julian John factor. How would you describe your relationship with the line minister?
I've had a wonderful relationship with the line minister.
Have you spoken with her since the firing?
The line minister, 10 days ago, at the final of Poetry Slam, commended me and recognized me as a person who helped her during a political campaign. And I don't burn bridges, you know.
Who do you think made the decision to fire you? If you talk Corporation Soul, and I'm asking if it's Colin Mimber.
Corporation Soul signed the letter, so that's where the responsibility lies.
Now, in the article in that weekly newspaper, they talk about personality clashes, they talk about leadership style, and they talk about contracts.
Those, well, the personality clashes and the leadership style are issues that we all have to work through if we're going to work together.
Now, those were the same two allegations or the same two reasons given in Helen Drayton's case. Do you know that, right?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. But what is that saying to us? That is saying to us that people are using the soft issues to tarnish other people, and that is unnecessary. Because in every situation, we will have differences. Any group of people you put together, we know what they go through in the norming, forming, storming. You know, we know that. We've learned that when we did our MBAs. We were in a storming situation, and there are ways to get through that. But the bigger issue is that nobody in the country wants to put conflict on the table and look at it and say, how do we resolve this?
Did they want to go forward with certain contracts and you said no? Or was it the other way around?
Those are board minutes. Those are confidential issues. That's an issue that
What was your issue with the contract?
That's an issue that I will not advocate publicly.
Is it that they wanted the contract and you didn't want the contract? What was the reason you gave for raising red flags on it?
I'm not in a position to speak to the specifics of contracts because I'm talking about governance. How can I be talking about governance and then come here and speak to you about the specifics of a contract? That would be duplicitous of me, and that to me is an issue.
Did you ever receive instructions from the line minister to grant a particular contract?
Again, you're asking for things that I think should remain in the domain of confidentiality. So I can't reveal that.
But if you talk about governance, Denise, obviously I will ask the questions about, you say that you had a vision and this is what you wanted. Obviously things were not either going your way or that your vision was not in alignment with the political directorate or the other board members. So I'm trying to figure out, what is it that the minister and the other board members were all in alignment and you were the only, you were the black sheep in the equation?
Well, the fact that I'm out may be an indication that I was the one not aligned. But hey, I go back to that we need to have a greater vision for our country.
Is it that the board determined contracts?
We need to have a greater vision for our country and ensure that we act in the interest of every Trinidadian and Tobagonian. It cannot be that we act in the interest of someone with a party card. That will get us nowhere.
Is that what was happening at TDC, that you were told to take care of those with party cards?
You won't ever get an instruction as explicit as that, Hema. But
Well,
that's
did they
not
tell you
the
take care of these
discussion.
people?
That's not the discussion I wish to have. Can't we have a bigger discussion about where should our country go?
Yeah, but if we have a bigger discussion, we must know what are the issues that led to where we are. And if you tell me that, okay, because I was out of the country, and when I spoke with you yesterday, I was appalled that you were fired. I was genuinely moved, and I thought, I don't understand this. I can't see. The same thing with Helen Drayton and the same thing with Jolene John. I could say, well, I really can't understand this because I just can't. But I ask you now, if you say that, all right, in Helen's case, the board could no longer work with her, and the article that's in the weekly newspaper speaks a lot. So we talk about personality and leadership. The same two reasons were given for the other females that we talk about. But then they also specifically highlighted contracts and contractual obligations of the TDC.
I'm very surprised that an article could have that depth of information.
You think a board member gave it?
Well, I don't know, and I'm not speculating around that. But clearly, the Sunshine has deep, deep, deep relationships.
Is it that you didn't want to give the contract to the person?
This is the third time you're asking me that question.
And what is your answer on the third time around?
Can you ask me another question?
Yeah, but you know, Denise, I look at it and I'm trying to figure out whether or not we have simply just changed the players, but the game is the same.
I think you're onto a good thing there, because when we look at the way our society operates, you know, my view on how boards should be appointed is that they should straddle political administrations, and that would prevent what we have seen in this country as a project coming to a halt simply because there has been a change in government.
Do you feel disappointed?
I am disappointed in a very general way, but I think I understand that we are still a young nation. We're still in the storming stage of our development, and nobody has yet given us the kind of inspired leadership for us to hold on to.
You know, we voted for change, and we voted for competence, and that's what people say when they say that they voted for change in 2015. They said that in 2010, they voted out a government on that. Do you feel, considering all of the allegations put forward in the public domain, that this is just the same thing over again?
I do have a sense of déjà vu. I do have that sense, but déjà vu will only continue if the non-aligned remain on the fence. I think good people in our country, have to stand up and say no to anything that they see that is wrong, that is inappropriate, because that's the only way we will have the change that we need. And it will be tension, but there's a dynamic tension that breeds a positive response.
Who do you think in the board pushed for your dismissal?
Doesn't matter.
Of course it does, and it shows you where the real power lies.
No, because that is not real power. That's not real power. Whatever is happening there, that dynamic is compliance with who they see as leadership. And I want to see leadership in this country that is very different. Our children are looking on. Our children want leadership that we can trust.
You talk about the fact that if you were in the political directorate today, you would be worried about the article put forward, because I look at not only the level of detail, but the allegations that have been put forward are very damning allegations. They talk about contracts, and that is the crux of every political administration. We say that, you know what, they eat our food and it's our time now, and that seeps into our jargon. And I ask you if it's deja vu, and you said, well, there's a sense of that.
There is a sense of that. And what I'm interested in is how do we move from here? And we will not move from here if the power to appoint an entire board continues to reside with the political party that has won the election. We have to have a bipartisan approach to selecting our boards. We have to open it up. Why couldn't civil society put persons on a board? Why couldn't Labour put persons on a board? Why couldn't religion put persons on a board?
Who was the contractor they wanted to give the contract to?
I don't listen. There's a fifth time, Emma.
Do you know the contractor? Were you given instructions to give
Are you
going
to continue asking me this question? Then we're going to continue to dance. So let's move on.
Yeah, but it must worry you, Denise.
It does not. You know why it doesn't worry me?
That the decision of a contract can lead to this, it can be the impetus that created the domino effect that you are sitting here today not talking about your vision for TDC, but talking about your vision for the country after being fired from TDC.
Mm-hmm.
Does that not concern you?
It does not concern me in the way you have described it. What it has done is given me an opportunity to become resilient or to strengthen my resilience. It has given me an opportunity to reflect on our society in a very different way. And I think that that reflection is bringing forward different approaches. Someone said to me recently, your problem is you are absolutely naive. I prefer to be naive with a dream that our society will live up to its potential than to go down a dark road.
Would you still support the PNM? And if you had to speak to Keith Rowley today, what would you tell him?
I still respect Keith Rowley. Keith Rowley has done a tremendous amount, but Keith Rowley has a lot more to do. And his legacy is not yet created. So the Prime Minister has an opportunity, tremendous opportunity, to pull this society together, to get rid of all of the bickering and the you versus us and the I versus them and the eat of food. He has that opportunity. And I pray that he will seize that opportunity and demonstrate to us that he was worthy of our support.
Do you think he's worthy of our support, considering what you've seen in the last 6 months, considering that you're sitting here this morning?
I think he is. I think he is worthy of our support. What we have to do now is let us see how he will continue to manage this country. Because at his age, he should be willing to fall on his own sword.
Yeah, okay, but this comes back to the same sort of practice where we reward people who are loyal with breaching fundamental principles of governance and procurement principles, transparency, those fad words that we use on every political platform. It's kind of like innovation in the 21st century.
But this is the opportunity he has. He can change all of that.
Do you think he knows what's going on?
I'm not sure. As a Prime Minister, I'm sure all kinds of things come through. You see all kinds of things. So I'm not sure. But this, to me, is an opportunity, and you have identified the particular trend. So, for instance, is this a trend in terms of female leadership?
Is it a trend in terms of political patronage? Is it a trend in terms of governance? Is it a trend in terms of rewarding your party faithful? What is the trend?
So this is an opportunity for reflection and asking yourself or himself, where do we go from here? What will really be my legacy? What will his grandchildren say 20 years down the road? Will his grandchildren be saying, listen, my grandfather made a difference. My grandfather was able to switch this society around. He was able to provide leadership that people stood and said, yes, there goes a man.
The fact that the weekly newspaper had the details of that board meeting, and I come back to leadership, I come back to issues of personality conflict, I come back to contractual obligations and who is supposed to be rewarded to do what. Because the TDC controls a lot of money.
No, the TDC does not control a lot of money. The budget is about $91 million.
Yeah, but
so it's not a lot of money.
But no matter what, there are big development projects of which you are partners of. And the fact that there are projects currently which are being reviewed. There's the Maracas project that's being reviewed, and that's one of the bigger projects that I can think.
That project is now under the Ministry of Tourism. So it's no longer a TDC project, and that happened a little while ago.
And the fact that these issues are the same issues from 2010, from 2011 and 2013. Do you regret your vote? Do you regret the support to the PNM, wanting change?
I don't regret my vote, but if the PNM does not change, and if I do not see the kind of leadership that I think the PNM has the opportunity to provide now, they will lose my heart. And losing my vote is one thing, but when you lose my heart, oh.
Denise, you know, you worked very closely with your line minister in the run-up to the elections. Did you feel jaded, slighted, or disappointed?
No, I'm a mother. Nurturing is what I do. I understand youth.
But then they all come out like bad children. What do you say then?
That's temporary.
And you're hoping good sense will prevail? You know, in the situation with Helen Drayton, that has sort of died in the public domain. Jolene John has come out fighting. If you know their different personalities, you'll understand that that was unexpected course of action from both. What are your options now? Will you be
This
seeking?
is going to die. This is a blip. This is going to die. My most optimistic view is that I will see in maybe a year or so on, but I will see in the future slight changes to how we select and how we do our business.
If you had to recommend changes to the TDC now, what would the changes be? Would you tell them, listen, board members, we can't be making decisions about who gets contracts?
I have continued, when I was the chair of TDC, I had continued to say to people that we must understand governance and understand roles and responsibilities. And that will continue to be my mantra. What is our role? What is our responsibility? Who do we have that responsibility to? You see, the TDC staff has not been considered in all of this. But there are 80-something or maybe 117 persons there who have given their best to this country. And for the last 6 years, they've had an experience of 6 ministers. I think I may now be the 6th chairman. They've had 5 CEOs. They've had about 4 or 5 PSs. In an organization like that, how could you expect people to function?
And how do you start the change if you wanted to be the change and you're now out?
Well, I'm hoping the fact that I'm public on this conversation, and I'm still trying to keep this conversation out of the he say, she say, them say approach.
And the controversial contract.
I'm trying to keep it out of that desperately. The fact that I'm having this conversation, I hope that there'll be some impact, that somebody will say, you know, there's a trend here. How can we stop this? How can we make our country better? You know, because the people at TDC want to begin to work, but they're unsettled. They don't trust.
Would you consider serving on a board again? If the political director calls you today and say to you, Denise Deming, you're a woman of substance, well respected, would you serve again?
There's no yes or no answer to that. Right now, the inclination, okay, let me say, no, I will not serve on a board. However, I may have an interest in something that I think will make a difference. And if that is presented to me from anybody in our society, not necessarily politics, anywhere in our society where someone comes to me or a project is presented that I think will make a difference to our country, I will roll up my sleeves and go after that. The fact that I'm a licensee for TEDx, that very, very utopian kind of idea that change the conversation and so on and so on, the fact that I do that indicates that I have a dream for this country.
We take a short break. When we come back, we'll continue our discussion. Stay with us. Welcome back, Trinidad and Tobago, and we continue our conversation with Denise Deming, Helen Drayton, Jolene John, now Denise Deming. Is it an issue of female leadership?
I think the society has an issue of female leadership. When you look around business, there aren't very many women who hold that top spot. And when you find a woman holding that top spot, it's very easy to hear whispers about her. There is a problem with female leadership. We're not prepared as yet, but the time is going to come, and it is emerging. We are going to have to confront each other on a face-to-face. You look behind the scenes, women provide all the support.
Did you think that that contract or the decisions surrounding that contract would lead to your dismissal?
I stuck to process as a chair, and that is my advice to anyone who gets into the chairmanship role or gets onto a board. Identify process and systems, and stick to that.
Did they want you to break procedure?
Once you stick to process and systems, you will not get in trouble.
Is it a contract that you knew?
When you start to do the work around, Hamer, number 10, you ask me the same question.
Did you know the contractor? Did you say to them, you know, did you imagine that your decision to say this is not proper procedure would have you sitting here this morning?
Hamer, my decisions are all that I can live by, because the only thing I have is a reputation and a name. And I always reference, there are two things I reference in my life. East Dry River, where I grew up, spent the first 17 years of my life, and the late Mother Bernadette. And those two, that situation and that person has instilled in me that the only thing you walk away from when everything is stripped away is your integrity.
How prevalent do you think that problem is with breach of procedure to choose selected contractors?
I think our country likes the workaround. For everything we do, we always are looking for, where's the workaround here? I want a license, how can I get it? Where's the workaround? Anything you want to do, people say, where's the link up?
Do you think it's prevalent in other boards as well?
I think that the workaround is prevalent in the society, and the political directorate has an opportunity to systematize things. The fact that we have not fixed the licensing authority in all of these years is an issue. This administration must fix it.
Would you be suing corporations soon?
No, darling. I don't have money to waste in court. And it is something that Corporation Soul can give and Corporation Soul can take away. So I'm not going to be getting involved in anything nasty. As I said to someone recently again, I'm going to close up my wigwam and go back on the prairie.
What lessons have you learned from this?
The lessons I've learned are that our society has to learn how to resolve conflict. We have to accept processes and procedures. We have to be true to ourselves, and we're not there yet. We have to cater to everyone despite their political party card. We have to cater to the Trinidadian. Once a political party gets in power, it's no longer a political party. It is governance.
Do you regret what you did at that board meeting?
I have very few regrets, you know, because the universe, for me, continues to unfold. And I am kind of deep and spiritual, and I'm guided.
Were you surprised when they asked you to do that? Were you surprised when the matters came up at board meetings? Should a board be discussing granting of contracts?
A lot of things surprised me on the board, but my pleasant memories of the board are rooted in my naivety, where I thought I had consensus, and maybe I didn't have consensus, you know? So I have some things to learn.
Was there a lot of hobnobbing? Was it a lot of cutthroat activity in the board?
Listen.
Do you think they went straight to the minister or the prime minister and said, listen, this woman is not playing ball, we have to get rid of her?
I don't know if anybody will have such a direct conversation, you know, but I thought, and if you look at the minutes of the board would reflect a very, very harmonious situation. So again,
it must not have been so harmonious to the fact that we see a termination letter on May 10th. On May 4th.
On May 4th. No, but I started off by saying that there was a gap between how we operate and how we should operate. And that, to me, is the crux of the issue. That gap and the absence of knowledge around roles and responsibilities. And maybe the mistake I made was not to start off with governance training.
Did anyone tell you at that meeting, Denise, you're going to pay a price for this?
No, because people will not say that. You know that.
We have to go straight to the 7 o'clock news. When we come back, we have a few minutes again with Denise Deming. She taught me business comm. It's funny when I hear her analyze. I actually did one of my first TV presentations in a class with Denise Deming, and she ripped me apart. But we're going to go straight to the 7 o'clock news. I'll see you after this. Welcome back, Trinidad and Tobago. We're continuing our conversation for a short bit with Denise Deming. I know we've been speaking with her. She's refused to comment directly on the controversial contract and that infamous board meeting, which triggered the events which led to her dismissal. Do you regret anything you did at that board meeting?
I take a very structured approach to what I'm doing. And I try not to regret any activities. And my focus continues to be what is in the best interests of the population. What is in the greater good here?
Do you think the rest of the board members saw it that way? Did they act in the best interests of the population?
I can't speak on behalf of other people. All I can do is be accountable for Denise. And Denise focuses on process, on systems, on the greater good.
Do you know, people looking at this interview, some people would think you're disloyal to the PNM.
That's okay, because disloyalty, there's a reason for disloyalty. And what is this thing about loyalty and disloyalty anyway? Am I going to be loyal to you even if I think that you're not doing the right stuff?
Do you think the board was doing the right stuff?
The board acted in a way that they felt was the best interest. If you look at the board minutes, there was a lot of consensus. If you look at the board minutes, you will see a board that was struggling with a number of issues. I think the greater good was served, and I think the greater good is being served.
What do you think was the major issue that led to your dismissal?
I continue to be a strong personality. I continue to call things the way I see it. I continue to be razor sharp, laser focused in what I think is right. So
and you didn't think the contract was right?
Changing my opinion requires that you provide data, that you provide evidence, that we have long conversations.
Wait.
I have a lot of patience for resolving conflict in a way that we can continue to love each other.
Were you surprised when the issue of the contract came up before the board?
I'm surprised at the detail that the Sunshine newspaper has.
Obviously, a board member gave it.
I can't say that, but I'm really surprised at that detail, and that is frightening, because it means that nothing that we do has the confidentiality and therefore the level of trust that is required.
Were you surprised the fact that the contract was being discussed at a board level?
I'm surprised that all of this conversation is in the public domain. But I will not be responsible for putting or adding to any of this in the public domain.
What did you say to the board members when the issue of the contract came up?
Hema, is there another question you want to ask me?
But I have that. What did you say to them? Did you say, I am not going to be discussing this? Did you ask if process and procedure?
Hema, it would be against all principle.
What did they tell you?
For me to repeat things that occurred in a board meeting.
What did they tell you?
So
did they say
you know that I'm not answering that question?
Did they say that we got instructions to give this contract? Did you say that we have to discuss this? What did they say to you?
Is there another question you wish to ask me?
What did you say to them? How did it conclude?
Hema, my vision for this country is that people of integrity will put themselves forward and lead with integrity.
You tried to lead with integrity. Look at where you are today, Denise. You're sitting and talking in your capacity as the fired chairman of PDC.
And that's fine. You know, and it's the only time I've ever been fired.
I would believe that. You taught me in school.
It's the only time I've ever been fired. So we move on.
What do you want to say to other board members today? If you had to speak to the TDC board, have you spoken with the new chairman? What would you tell him?
If I had to speak to anyone who accepts a position on a board in Trinidad and Tobago, I would say to them, keep that state performance monitoring manual close to you. Have a look at the Articles of Association, have a look at the Companies Act, and operate according to those things that are prescribed. Because someone at some point sat down and said, once we have state enterprises, these are the things that will determine how they function.
Do you think the board members currently fit the criteria of the fit and proper test?
Whew, that's a hard one. I can't comment on that, Hema.
But you know the personalities, you know their competence, you know their skill set. Do you think that they fit the criteria to be sitting and making decisions on a company at a time when we're diversifying and we're looking to tourism?
I don't know if that diversification call has been made. There's lip service, but the fundamentals of diversification, I don't think those have been put out there. So I continue to say that there was a gap between the governance and what is expected in governance and the action. And we have to narrow that gap. To narrow that gap, we have to take a team approach to that. In order to take a team approach to that, we have to be comfortable with conflict, we have to be comfortable with diversity, we have to be comfortable with differences.
Now, people were not comfortable with your leadership style if you follow that article. Is it that you were dictatorial?
That's for other people to say, but if I had to self-analyze in terms of my style, I wouldn't say that it is dictatorial. I would say that I'm a strong leader, and I'm someone who you have to convince. So you have to present reasoned arguments, and you have to present evidence. If you don't have reasoned arguments or evidence, leave me alone.
Would you be surprised if the contract is awarded to that firm and eventually you find that out? And what would your assessment of the board be then, and the line minister and Corporation Sole and the political policies?
You know, we are focusing narrowly on Denise Deming and so on, and we have forgotten that the tourism supply chain is where we ought to be focusing. There are restaurateurs, hoteliers, tour operators who are hurting because this economy, this directorate has not decided what is the tourism product, where are we going, how are we doing it. And those are the people who are suffering. And those are the people who will ensure that our society continues to does the diversification. But the call has not been made.
And if you see that the contract has been awarded, what would your assessment be then? Would you say, I can't believe that this has happened? Would you feel slighted? Would you feel upset? Would you feel, I think that this is the same game we're playing with different players?
Hema, you have not accepted yet that I am taking a long vision with regard to our country. I'm taking a long vision. So all of those little blimps that occur, those little blips on the horizon that occur, you have to look at them and say, this too shall pass. You know, whatever happens with all of those issues, this too shall pass. And let's look at where are we going. When are we going to fix the air bridge? You know, there's talk about that, but there's no action.
When are we going to fix TDC?
There's talk about that. There are 5 studies going on at the moment. 5 studies that are simultaneous, that are even focusing on the same issues. Fixing TDC means standing, reflecting, and asking ourselves some hard questions.
You know,
and that's what the Prime Minister has to do, and his cabinet. They have to look at themselves and ask themselves, really, are we providing the leadership that we promised during the election time?
You know, when you talk about board members and you look at the fact that you say that you stand for integrity and you had a vision, there is also the characteristics, personal characteristics that people expect board members to display. You have, and I could list it up, honesty, integrity, you know the skill set. Do you think that the board members fit that? And if you talk about integrity and you say, well, all right, in the best interest of process and procedure, I stand with integrity, this is not right. Do you think the rest of the board members shared your view?
I make an assumption about humans, about mankind, that you come to the table in the best and the most honest way that you can.
Did they come in the best and most honest way?
I have to accept, I have to take that. I take it as I see it. You've come here, you look at me and you say, I do not wish to harm you. I come here in peace. I come here to do what is necessary. That has not changed in my view.
What is your next step, Denise Deming? What is in the future for Denise Deming?
I don't have a crystal ball, but I will continue to do the things that I've done, run a consultancy. I will continue to serve in the various ways that I serve. I will continue to be a licensee for TEDx.
Are you fearful of political victimization? You've stood up against...
I'm almost fearless.
The closing comments there from Denise Deming. I know we've taken the interview well beyond the scheduled time. We take a short break. When we come back, we'll have more for you. Stay with us.